Rome did not disappear in a single dramatic moment. It did not collapse into dust the day barbarians crossed its borders. The truth is far stranger and far more powerful. Rome survived, not in the West, where its monuments crumbled, but in the East, where its legacy transformed into something new. While the Western Roman Empire faded in 476 AD with the deposition of Emperor Romulus Augustulus, the eastern half of the empire continued to live, govern, and fight for another 1,000 years. This state would later be known as the Byzantine Empire. But to its people, it was never Byzantium. It was simply Rome. The Eastern Empire had always been different, wealthier, more urbanized, and more connected to the trade networks of Asia and the Mediterranean. The eastern provinces were far more resilient than the war-torn West. When Emperor Constantine the Great founded a new imperial capital in 330 AD on the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, he was not abandoning Rome. He was relocating its center of gravity. The new city was named Constantinople, and it quickly became one of the most powerful and strategic cities on Earth. Surrounded by water and protected by massive defensive walls, Constantinople sat at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, controlling trade routes that linked continents. This location would allow the Eastern Empire to survive waves of invasions that shattered the Western provinces. While the Western Empire struggled with economic collapse, internal corruption, and constant barbarian incursions, the Eastern Roman Empire developed a stronger administrative system and a more stable economy. Its bureaucracy collected taxes efficiently, funded armies, and maintained infrastructure. Greek gradually replaced Latin as the primary language of government and culture, reflecting the Eastern Mediterranean roots of the empire. Christianity also became deeply intertwined with imperial authority, shaping laws, politics, and daily life. Yet despite these cultural changes, the empire's leaders still called themselves Roman emperors. Their armies were Roman armies. Their laws were Roman law. One of the greatest moments in this Eastern Roman story came during the reign of Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century. Justinian dreamed of restoring the old Roman Empire to its former glory. Under his rule, the empire launched massive military campaigns to reclaim lost Western territories. Byzantine generals such as Belisarius and Narses marched across the Mediterranean, defeating powerful enemies and temporarily recovering regions like North Africa, Italy, and parts of Spain. For a brief moment, the map of the Roman world began to resemble its ancient form again. Justinian's ambitions were not limited to war. He also reshaped Roman law itself. The massive legal compilation known as the Corpus Juris Civilis reorganized centuries of Roman legal tradition into a unified code. This legal framework would later influence the development of law across Europe for centuries. At the same time, Justinian launched monumental construction projects, including the famous Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, a massive cathedral whose enormous dome seemed to float above the city like a symbol of divine authority and imperial power. But the Byzantine Empire was never simply a continuation of the past. Over time, it evolved into a unique civilization that blended Roman governance, Greek culture, and Christian theology. Its emperors ruled with absolute authority, often presenting themselves as God's chosen representatives on earth. Its capital became a center of learning, diplomacy, and intrigue where ambassadors from distant lands negotiated with court officials in golden halls. The empire also became famous for its strategic brilliance. Surrounded by powerful enemies, Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, and later the Turks, the Byzantines developed new forms of warfare and diplomacy to survive. Their armies relied on disciplined infantry, heavily armored cavalry known as cataphracts, and one of history's most mysterious weapons, Greek fire. This terrifying incendiary substance could burn even on water and was often deployed by Byzantine naval forces to destroy enemy fleets. Many attackers who approached Constantinople's massive walls would discover that conquering the city was far harder than they expected, and those walls were legendary. The Theodosian walls of Constantinople formed one of the most formidable defensive systems ever built. Triple layers of stone fortifications protected the city from land assaults for nearly 1,000 years. Numerous sieges failed against them, including massive attacks by Persians, Arabs, and Bulgars. As Western Europe struggled through the chaos of the early medieval period, Constantinople remained a shining metropolis of wealth, trade, and scholarship. Yet survival came with constant struggle. The empire faced devastating plagues, religious conflicts, and political intrigue that often erupted into palace coups or civil wars. The rise of Islam in the 7th century dramatically reshaped the Eastern Mediterranean world, stripping the empire of vast territories including Egypt, Syria, and North Africa. These regions had once been vital economic centers, and their loss forced the Byzantines to adapt quickly or risk collapse. Despite these setbacks, the empire reorganized its military system into regional defense zones called themes, allowing it to survive centuries of pressure. For hundreds of years, the Byzantine Empire acted as a shield between Europe and expanding powers from the east. Its armies and diplomats delayed invasions, negotiated alliances, and preserved classical knowledge that might otherwise have vanished. Greek scholars copied ancient texts, philosophers studied Aristotle and Plato, and engineers maintained the urban infrastructure inherited from Rome. In many ways, Byzantium served as the bridge that carried the ancient world into the medieval era. But the empire's greatest threat would eventually come not from distant invaders, but from the fractured politics of the Christian world itself. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Western European crusaders, originally marching to the Holy Land, turned their attention toward Constantinople. Instead of defending the Christian East, they attacked it. The city was brutally sacked, its treasures looted, and its population slaughtered. The event shattered the Byzantine state and permanently weakened its power. Although Byzantine rulers eventually reclaimed Constantinople decades later, the empire would never fully recover from the devastation. Over the following centuries, a new power began rising in Anatolia, the Ottoman Turks. Slowly, territory after territory fell under Ottoman control as the once vast Byzantine Empire shrank to little more than Constantinople and a few surrounding regions. By the mid-15th century, the last remnants of Rome stood isolated against a growing empire. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II launched the final siege of Constantinople. Massive cannons pounded the ancient walls that had protected the city for nearly 1,000 years. After weeks of relentless assault, the defenses finally broke. Ottoman forces flooded into the city, and the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, died fighting in the streets alongside his soldiers. With his death, the Roman Empire, which had begun more than 2,000 years earlier, finally came to an end. But the story of Byzantium is not simply one of decline or collapse. For over a millennium after the fall of the Western Empire, this Eastern Roman state preserved knowledge, culture, and political traditions that shaped the future of Europe and the Mediterranean world. Without Byzantium, much of ancient Greek and Roman learning might have disappeared. Without its armies and diplomacy, the map of Europe could have looked very different. Rome did not truly fall in the 5th century. It transformed, it adapted, it endured. The empire that once ruled from the Tiber River found new life on the shores of the Bosporus, where Roman emperors spoke Greek, prayed in Christian cathedrals, and defended their empire against the tides of history for 1,000 more years. The name Byzantium may have come later, but its people knew the truth. They were Romans, and for a millennium after the fall of the West, Rome was still alive,